She didn't even try.
I've often told people, well, yeah, I got the worst beard in Webster County. Well, no, the second worst. There's a 19-year-old kid that's coming
That's
worse
right.
than me.
That's right. Well, I had planned to try to grow something here, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't connect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We're back up.
We back?
Yep.
Hey, we're back. We lost a little service there. We did pay our internet bill, but sometimes that's technology. But producer Logan Fraker, by the way, got us going. So sorry for the interruption. Now, where were we, Nicholas?
I don't even remember what we were talking about. Oh, Cherry Blossom Festival, I think.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's been fun for 19 years, and
Right.
and of course, a lot of what we do now takes place here at the community center.
Yeah, absolutely, and we appreciate that. We, you guys are good customers or whatever for us, and in helping to utilize the facility and
We even hosted Laura Bush here.
help us to pay. I was getting right. That was my next question.
Yeah.
Now, out of all the people that you've had in here, who do you feel like was the most? No, let's not say interesting, but the most important, or the one, the person that you really felt like, okay, this is the cream of the crop. Who would you say?
Well, of course, Mrs. Bush makes that list.
Yeah, I would think so.
And she couldn't have been nicer
Right.
to deal with. And
Very down to earth.
in fact, right after the festival that year, my appendix ruptured and I was in the hospital for a long time. And Mrs. Bush, who, I just had that small exposure to, reached out to me in the hospital. And I
Wow.
thought she didn't have to do that. It just showed me the class that she had.
Right.
And she couldn't have been nicer coming to Marshfield, and her
Right.
people working with and bringing her here. And so that was a big moment, I felt, for us.
Sure.
But the light bulb moment, I would call it, when we started the festival, Betty Hearns, that had been Missouri First
Right.
Lady, they have the Dogwood Azalea Festival in her hometown of Charleston, Missouri. She said it'll take 25 years at least before your festival will become a tradition that everybody embraces.
Right.
Before people will come home and they'll take ownership in it. And I felt it was several years before Mrs. Bush came, because I think she was here in 2014. Her daughter Jenna visited. And people knew Jenna from television. Maybe not everybody remembered her from her father's presidency, but they knew her from the Today Show and things. And I felt that was the light bulb year when more local people bought into
Kinda
the
stepped up a
idea.
notch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was instrumental in getting Mrs. Bush here.
Right.
And then, of course,
'Cause
Jenna.
she was able to go back and say, yeah,
Yes.
this is something you probably should do. And but obviously the Garsts were very
Yes, the
important.
Garsts were very important in that. Robert and Edith Garst and their son Bobby,
Right.
their relationship, that was
They're
huge.
they're my cousins, you know.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, but Bobby and Lily Garst were very instrumental that year in Mrs. Bush coming, and the Bush twins came that year as well. They came back. They missed each other in transition, but they did come back. So Jenna's been here now 2 times at least.
Right.
But I felt that was a year that more locals took buy-in to.
Right.
And it pleases me when people will contact me now and say, can we have this event during the festival? Will you include it in your advertising?
Right.
And, it's now gone from 2 days to 3 days to almost a week of
Well,
festivities.
you certainly
now.
have a dedicated audience. You
Oh,
have
yeah.
a captive audience. I mean, the people that are coming into town, they're looking for something to do. So it does.
And they come from all over the world, which amazes
Right.
me.
Right.
From England and Canada. And last year there was someone here from Afghanistan that was a fan of Nellie Olson's that wanted to come and came just to see her and then to visit the Wilder home. So, it's not just local people, but we have built a community within the Cherry Blossom Festival. I call them Cherry Festers. And people that are friends that would have never known one another that gather here every year for almost like a reunion.
Right. So beyond obviously Mrs. Bush would be at the top of the list, but beyond that, as far as being someone that you really feel like you really did something to get her to come, or you've arrived, right? But who would you say has been maybe one of the most interesting to you as far as sitting down, listening to their stories, just whoever they might have been with over the years, or
I'll answer that
collaborated
with
with or whatever.
2 answers.
Yeah.
One is Jim Lavelle, and Jim was handcuffed to Oswald when he was shot, and he's the man in the white suit,
the cowboy
you see,
hat. Yeah.
And Jim visited Marshfield not long before he passed away.
Right.
He'd also been a Pearl Harbor survivor,
Right.
and to
I
hear
watched
him,
your interview on that. I think that you had them on at Did you have them on a podcast or on an
Maybe he could have been interviewed on a podcast but he was interviewed at the Assembly of God when he was here,
on the stage.
And yes, and his detail of what he remembered from that day, even though he was pretty aged, was remarkable. I thought, and that was fascinating to me. The other one was a conversation that I overheard. George McGovern was here one year, and he was here at an event that Ken Heckler was at, and Ken was the oldest former living member of Congress at the time, and he had been a speechwriter for President Truman. And John Truman, President Truman's great nephew, who knew President Truman well, and Curtis Roosevelt, FDR's grandson, who came from France that year and had lived in the White House while his grandfather was president. And I overheard the four of them in the corner having a discussion about whether Roosevelt had told Truman about the atomic bomb. And they all had firsthand knowledge of something that they thought backed up why they felt the way they did.
Yeah.
And to hear these four distinguished historians really have this conversation fascinated me.
Oh, I'm sure.
And
why didn't you turn your phone on video? And
I should have, but I just was soaking it up.
It.
And Curtis Roosevelt says, I was having lunch with my grandfather and Vice President Truman on the lawn of the White House, and my grandfather excused me at one point after dessert, and I feel that's when he told him about the atomic bomb. And Ken Heckler says, no, President Truman told me that nobody told him about it. And, they're going back and forth about this. And it was fascinating to me. And to see moments like that, or that same year Curtis Roosevelt was here, we have the Hubble dinner at the festival. And we present the Hubble Medal of Initiative at that night's event. And so Curtis Roosevelt was on one side of me at dinner, and Deborah Dozier was on the other, who was Joan Fontaine's daughter. And I was having a conversation with Curtis saying, while you lived in the White House, was there ever anybody that you wanted to meet that you didn't get the opportunity to? He said, yes, Olivia de Havilland. I said, well, you live in France and she lives in Paris. He said, she does? And I said, and better yet, this is her niece. And so they began to have a conversation over
Olivia
the top of me.
Olivia and Joan Fontaine were sisters.
Yes, and although they didn't have a good relationship, the niece and Olivia maintained a very close relationship. So they began to have this conversation about the possibility of Curtis being able to communicate with Olivia, that he had to come to Marshfield to have it all take place.
Now, isn't there some connection, Olivia? And you done a story or something about it? Is there a connection with her to Marshfield or something?
Well, Olivia received the Hubble Medal.
Yeah, but I thought it was like something different.
No, and then after that, she recorded Sue Eichard's poem about the Cherry Blossom Festival, and we play that as the concluding thing of the festival every year. Yeah. And she sent remarks the year Laura Bush was here, and she was very... And we do the Cherry Blossom magazine, which is called Our America Magazine.
Right.
And Olivia was on the cover of the first issue.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, okay, that's what that's what I was thinking.
And she was helping pick out, even past 100. She was so hands-on and detailed about everything.
But she doesn't have any relation connections. Okay,
not here.
Okay,
and so she was very opinionated about what the cover picture was going to look like, and we were communicating about that just shortly before she passed away. So there's been a lot of fascinating people connected to the festival.
You got pretty close to Thelma Lou.
Yes, and I'm often asked who my favorite festival guest is. I would say that was Betty.
Yeah.
She, of course, was from Missouri, Kansas City. Almost moved to Marshfield. It was between she was leaving Los Angeles. Things had gotten rough where she lived.
Yeah.
She was choosing between Marshfield and Mount Airy, North Carolina, the hometown of Andy Griffith. She ultimately chose Mount Airy, which she should have because they have the Andy Griffith Museum. Yeah. She would appear once a month there, sign autographs. But she traveled to Marshfield outside of cherry blossom time to see what it was like, to see if she wanted to move here. Came for the 4th of July, you may remember that.
Yeah, I think
Rode in the parade, had lunch out at some of your relatives, and you know.
Do you think that it's a little sad, but it's a little bit, kind of hard to believe that some of those people that were such big stars in the 50s or the 60s, or as we were children, even like Ellie Mae or some of them, they sort of kind of end up, not really desolate, but they really kind of end up maybe lonely and not as financially well as they should have. for the fame that
yes.
they reached at that young age.
I think a lot of the time the assumption is that people receive residuals from shows that maybe they didn't foresee was going to be such a
I think
success,
they
and
just
they
get screwed out of it by their agents and
well,
producers
and maybe
stuff.
some of that's what happens. But I think
Right.
sometimes they don't know that these shows are going to be
Right.
such a big
But
deal.
don't you think Paul Henning probably was a wealthy man? I mean,
Oh, I'm sure he was.
the guy that produced
Yeah.
Petticoat Junction and Green Acres and all those shows, and
Beverly
you
Hillbillies.
know, I mean, I don't know. It just seems really, it's just kind of sad, really.
It is, and Donna Douglas is a great example of
Yeah.
somebody that, you know, some of these stars they're working until
Right.
they just aren't physically
Lulu,
able to.
you can tell Lulu's probably not a real wealthy person.
Yeah.
I mean, she
well,
may,
and
she
I
may
think
be fine, but I mean, for the fame that they reach.
I think a lot of them. That's exactly what happened. Is
Yeah.
people just say, "Oh, they get residuals," and they don't,
Right.
and they're still trying to make a living.
Right.
And I think that's what's good about the festival. People often say, "Why? How do classic television stars fit into what you're doing?" And I always say, you know, pop culture is a big part of our history.
It's all just touching a part of us. Each
Yeah.
of us have a part of history within us, whether
Yep.
it's government, politics,
Mhm.
television, radio,
Sure.
family. It's all history. It's all remembering how things were
Yeah.
from days gone by.
And they take some of those shows take you back to your childhood,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to watch people's reactions with some of those stars. Like when Richard Thomas was here from the Waltons, to watch people relate to him.
Mm-hmm.
I always use this as two examples. Dean Butler, who played Almanzo Wilder on Little House on the Prairie, when fans react to him, especially ladies, you know, they're all googly-eyed usually.
And Richard Thomas. Too.
Well, and to a degree, but when they see Richard Thomas, for a lot of people, it was like seeing their big brother. They felt that kind of connection to him, which, you know, was something that was a raw emotion for some people.
Right.
You know, I remember working an event with Richard, MC'd a Walton event in Schuyler, Virginia, where he was the guest, and listening to the stories, and I was helping with the photographs as people went through the line. And one man said, when I was in Vietnam, we would at night do a sound off of "Good Night, John Boy, Good Night, Mary Ellen" to see who was still alive. And his reaction to that was, you know, you've gone to a whole different level of people's life and history.
Yeah. I think
there's a
one question
connection.
too that I hear people ask sometimes is, well, how do you help pay their expenses? You have to. I mean,
Sure.
you've got to pay plane tickets. You got to maybe provide them a room, or how do you? I know you've got your fundraisers, but do you have endowments? How do you really fund everything?
Well, we raise the money every year,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like we ever start with a flush bank account because the average festival costs a lot to put on.
Sure it would.
The first year of the festival, to try to convince all these presidential descendants to come to Marshfield, a place they'd never heard of before, to leave their homes in Baltimore and New York and places, a lot of us personally paid for things because, you know, you had to pay for their airfare, their lodging, and all those things to come. But then a lot of those people, once they visited Marshfield, the comment was made at the first festival, especially amongst the presidential descendants, we've never had this opportunity to be in camaraderie this way.
Right.
Can we come back?
Right.
Well, that amazed me. And so a lot of them come back on their own dimes.
Right.
But we try to provide everybody's lodging. And so that can be quite a feat. And so we have sponsorships, so that helps. And we have our fundraisers during the festival. And we have had some families that give money. The Garst were a great example.
Sure.
While Robert and Edith Garst were alive, they were very generous to the festival. There have been others who have contributed well, and some that contribute annually, which help us.
Right. I'm assuming you're like a not-for-profit.
We are.
501c, so
for
anyone that wants to,
we have a fund with the community foundation that enables people to do that. But now some of the stars, it's negotiated differently with everybody.
Right.
But some of them we have to pay airfare, and some of them we don't. And some of them, once they've been here, like I said, they want to come back again, or they say, my friend told me about this, can I come?
Right.
You know you're successful when new stars start calling and say, can I come?
Right. So like some of the sitcom stars, the child stars that are, you know, they've been here 3 or 4 years now, and gosh, it seems like anybody that would have wanted a book maybe has already got one, or are they? I mean,
But they still do well.
They still do well.
Yes.
Just new people coming in, and I just was curious about
and
that.
One thing that I've always said that played into the success of the festival was because we were limited on how many beds we had as far as hotel accommodations, we started the host family program.
Yeah.
And so a lot of local people keep people.
Sure.
For instance, the Little House on the Prairie cast, they've always stayed with the same host. They don't stay in, in a hotel. They stay with a host family.
Right.
Some of our presidential descendants, like the Monroe family, they've stayed at Martha Myers' house all 19 years.
Yeah.
And these families become connected to these
Right.
people. Carolyn Yates always kept Maggie Peterson from the Andy Griffith Show. They were like sisters.
She passed too.
Yeah, she did. And they were close friends. And when Carolyn passed away, it really affected Maggie.
Sure.
When Jimmy Myers passed away, the Monroe family was wanting to know what could they do. It's interesting. Right. And what's interesting about the presidential history side, when you host somebody in your house, you want to have a conversation that's intelligent with them.
Right.
So you're going to do your homework about Andrew Jackson or whoever you're keeping in your house. Yeah. And then you have a local tour guide. And so it makes you want to come back because you have a friend.
Right.
And I think that's been a huge part of the success of the festival.
Yeah. Well, it certainly has been successful. And you guys have, you and all of your volunteers and your team members have done a great job.
And let me emphasize that. There are two groups. There's the Cherry Blossom Committee, which is the governing board of the festival. And there's 20-some of us. Mm-hmm. But then we needed more help. So we started the Cherry Blossom Auxiliary. And my mother is the president of that. In fact, they met this morning. They meet monthly. They're our volunteer arm. We tell them what we need. They
Fix
help
the breakfast, make the pies.
They do lots of that. Yeah. They fundraise. If there's some particular project we want help with, we go to them and say, will you fund this? Or they host their own events during the festival. They host the teacher's breakfast the first morning of the festival, which is a free breakfast for any educator. Mm-hmm. That's a big festival event. They do all those kind of things, and they have a gob of members, and they do educational trips throughout the year. They just went to St. Louis for the Dred Scott Memorial.
You're on that board, right?
I go to that committee and give reports, a festival report.
But the Dred Scott Committee?
Oh, yes. I thought you meant the auxiliary. Yes, no. I'm on the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. The auxiliary just took a trip to Plains, Georgia, because we're sister festivals with the Peanut Festival there. They do all kinds of stuff throughout the year. Yeah. So it does take an army. Sure. And all these different things that happen during the festival, a lot of them have their own committees. Like there's a tea committee that does the cherry blossom tea. And then we started serving sassafras tea. So then there had to be a whole committee of people that gathered and cleaned the tea, the sassafras roots. And, it takes a lot of people.
Right. Well, you're lucky you can get them to do it.
Yes, and if they wasn't for all of them, it wouldn't get done.
Right.
Yeah.
What's on the horizon
for this next festival?
Yeah.
I don't know what all's going to happen yet. I'm still working on who's coming, but as I said, it is the 50th anniversary of Little House on the Prairie, so that will be a big event that'll happen. I do know the Methodist men are going to host the College of the Ozarks Band again this year. And a new thing to the schedule is they're going to perform on Sunday night as the concluding event of the festival. We will do the First Lady's piano concert again this year at the Methodist Church. Last year, the Ministerial Alliance became involved, and we had the kickoff service at the Methodist Church. And I think we plan to do a kickoff service for the week again. It was important to me that the people coming to Marshfield and the people in Marshfield understand that part of who we are and the fabric of who we are is our culture, is our faith. And so we have Cherry Blossom Sunday, and I wanted to have a kickoff service to pray for the week and pray for the people that are coming.
Was it on the Sunday prior? Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of ministers participated. The community choir sang. The community bell choir played. It was really a nice event, and the church was full, and it was really good. So I think the more local people that get involved as the years go by, the more successful we will be.
Right. You've got a lot of memorabilia. You had a lot of memorabilia before you even started this.
That's correct.
As a kid, you collected, and I know. Did you ever get to visit or meet Mrs. Walton?
Yes.
Yeah.
Helen Walton. Yes.
I remember. I can't remember.
If you remember that story, we sent somebody every year to the annual meeting in Bentonville.
Right.
And I kept saying to you I wanted to go. Right. And so I forget it. Usually it was somebody that had been an associate for a long time, a seasoned associate. And so I bought one share of Walmart stock so that I could go. And Mandy Shatoon and I went down. And I told you before I went, my goal is to have my picture with Helen Walton.
And I gave you some pointers.
You did. And so we arrived at at this big auditorium where this is going to take place,
Uh-huh.
and I think it was the president of Walmart was speaking.
Right.
Mrs. Walton's on the front row, and I knew when he finished speaking, everybody would stand up and applaud. And Mrs. Walton had some health difficulties, so I knew she was not going to be able to stand up. So
you were plotting even then, weren't you?
So Mandy Shatoon and I are watching this unfold, and I said, Mandy, we're going to go down on the floor, and about the time we think he's getting ready to wrap up. And when they stand up, you take my picture, and we'll have it taken before everybody is even seated. And that's exactly what happened, and it worked out perfect. And I came back to you at the store, maybe that day, I don't even remember, and said, you said, well, did you get it? I said, yes, I did.
See, I forgot that. Honestly, I did. But I remember that you were going to do it, and we talked about it, but
that's how it happened.
That's cool.
And then later, Sarah and I represented our store at Mrs. Walton's funeral.
Oh, okay.
And that was really an experience. Somebody who had been such an advocate for the associates.
Did they let everybody, all stores?
Yes. Well, I don't know that all stores. We went, and we who did we go with? Rose Boyce went with us, and Mary Young. The four of us went, and of course they'd been longtime original associates, and so the four of us went down. And
Melanie and I were down there this week for a concert at the Walmart Amphitheater, which is unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
But my gosh, that community is just, I was going down there in 87, 88, through the 90s, up to 04 for various corporate meetings and classes and so forth. And it's just unbelievable what that area has done. I mean,
this as well as I do, there's often pushback from different sections of our community about when Walmart will go into a town. But when we had our closing party at the old store and we invited the former associates and managers to be there, it amazed me at how many people here had gotten their start at Walmart.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you asked, I mean, these were attorneys, teachers, all sorts of facets of our community. And then when you asked how many of you met your spouse at Walmart, half the room, including me, I always say my wife was the best deal I ever got at Walmart, but the most expensive.
Well,
that's the truth.
There is some truth to that.
Yes, there you go.
Well, it's like these Dollar Generals. Somebody's like, oh, Lord, another Dollar General. Yeah. And you know what? These people over here in this part of town, they appreciate being able to. I live on the east side.
Sure.
And I appreciate
being able to pull in
there to get a bottle of laundry soap as opposed to driving across the interstate, across the overpass. And,
that's true.
You don't think the people of Fordland and Conway, and I understand Niangua and Elkland are going to get one.
Oh, wow.
It's out there in the books. I mean, people deserve to be able to have an opportunity to buy their goods.
Sure.
And I think it's all supporting a community. It all works together.
Well, I mean, you were at that closing party. You saw.
Absolutely.
Of course, how many people you hired over the years.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Well, I think we're gonna have to wrap up. We've went a little over, but we were shorted a little bit. But Nicholas, the last thing I want to mention is Route 66, the Centennial, is coming up in 2026. I'm on the state commission, and we hope to do some big things. You were at the Hidden Waters ribbon cutting the other day, the Welcome Center, and I was honored to get to say a few things about Route 66 there. But I look forward to working toward a really good event for our community, for tourism.
It's wonderful.
For economic growth in 2026 with Route 66. Maybe the Cherry Festival, we can talk about some collaboration for that.
That'd be awesome.
Obviously, the 4th of July Independence Weekend will be big for that as well. But the state committee will try to coordinate events across the state. And, there's only 12 entities, 11 counties in the city of St. Louis. And so when you break that down by city, there's really not that many cities along the route, and it can be coordinated.
Sure.
For example, we don't want to have something the same weekend that Springfield has the Founders Festival, and the 4th of July hopefully can be the event that, or the Cherry Festival or whatever as we plan things. So anyway, that's something I wanted to mention to you and keep in the back of your mind. We'll be working on that. But I appreciate what you do to help preserve not only national and state history, but as well local history, which is what we're trying to do here, and getting things documented and connections to people.
Appreciate
that's
what
we're
you do
trying to do. Yeah. So we'll have you back. Thanks for coming in today, and Have a
It's
good
an
weekend.
honor to be here.
All right, man. Thanks.
Yeah.